Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for the purpose of the minutes, all our members are here. I'd also like to mention that this meeting is in person and is being recorded. Okay, so we have a new member. His name is Patrick Saunders. Is that correct? Okay. So what I like to do when we have a new member is everybody kind of introduce themselves and just a little bit back, what their professional background is, so that he knows where people are coming from, and then he'll tell us a little bit about him. So, Bill, you want to start?
Sure, I'm Bill Bowles. I'm retired. I was a project manager in the information technology sector, and I've been a Dartmouth resident since 1976.
Okay, Terry?
All right. Terry Ham. My background, I'm retired too. My background was working in public schools. I've been on the finance committee since 2015.
Okay. My name is Bob Gorvin. I'm the chairman. I'm a retired chief financial officer. I'm on the board of directors of two companies, and I'm co-founder of St. Anne's Shrine Preservation Society in Fall River. I've lived in Dartmouth for 36 years, and I think, how many years have you been on? I'm 1 year after you.
2015.
So I've been on the FinCom since 2016. Okay, Janine?
Janine Simmons, retired. I've had a long career in technology, doing financial and technical analysis, and I managed 8 offices, technical centers across North America.
I'm Brian O'Hare. I've been in Dartmouth since 2015. I'm retired also. Worked for large consumer products companies in New York and other parts of the country. I also had my own consulting company for about 26 years. We used to computerize small company sales forces and show management how to manage the actual sales force based on results. I've been a member of this committee for 5 years and various other committees in town, and I also serve as the director of volunteer programs at the Veterans Transition House in New Bedford.
Okay, John?
John Souza, going to keep the momentum going, also retired.
Does anybody work anymore?
Spent 37 years in the electric utility industry in construction management. Lived in Dartmouth all my life. Long-time volunteer in Dartmouth on various boards for the past 35 years. Been on the finance committee now, I think, 3 years at least.
In planning.
Welcome.
Board. In planning board, too.
Planning board, yeah, I served on
Yeah.
various boards throughout town. Planning board for 27 years, I believe. So.
I'm Carrie Parsons. I am not retired. I have been a nurse for over 25 years. I have a master's degree in nursing education. I work at UMass Dartmouth. I also work at South Coast. I've been a resident of Dartmouth since 2002, so 23 years. And I'm invested in the town, and that's why I joined a little over a year ago, and it's been the best thing that I found to participate in.
Phil?
Phil Lind. I'm not retired either. I may look like it, but I'm not. I've lived in Dartmouth for this will be 33 years. I've served on the school committee and a number of boards and committee in town. I've worked in IT for 36 years.
All right, Patrick, you're up.
I'm Patrick Saunders, unfortunately also not retired. Maybe I'll switch with John next meeting. I was raised in Dartmouth for most of my life, attended Dartmouth Public Schools and UMass Dartmouth. I'm currently employed as a funeral director in New Bedford and Mattapoisett, and I am on the board for a local human services organization. I serve as their finance committee chair. as well. So I'm passionate about helping people with developmental disabilities.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're going to stop the budget hearing at the Dartmouth Police Station. I just want to say, and I know, Brian, you kind of spearheaded this, that the format is like 10 times better than it was. So I really appreciate
Oh,
all the
thank
work
you.
you've done
Thank you.
on that. I looked at the police department, it's like, everything's right there, you know, so. Okay, I'd like to invite Chief Levesque up to the podium.
Thank you. Brian Levesque, Chief of Police in Dartmouth. Been with the department now for 27 years, and also not retired, and going on 8 as chief. So I appreciate the feedback on the new format. This was my first go-around with the new format, so as we're going through, if you have any comments, any way for me to improve it next year, I'm happy to take notes and incorporate that. I did my best this time around, though. It was a kind of a big change from the previous budgets.
Can I just, before you get going, since I did a lot of the work on putting this together, the whole intent was to tie the mission statement and what, not just you, but every department's mission statement to the expenditures they make, so that we can say that they're actually achieving what their goals are in the mission statement.
Yep,
Which is a big difference from what we used to do, which is go through things on a line item basis,
right.
which we still do anyhow, but this adds to it. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Okay, I'll just go through the slides. Any questions as they come up, just feel free to interrupt, and I'll do my best to answer it. So I started out with the mission statement. I think you've all had a chance to take a look at that. That's been consistent for quite a number of years now, the mission statement, so no changes with that. The first thing that was asked was to kind of review the current budget and see where we're at. When I did this, we were about 50% halfway through the year, so that's what these numbers reflect.
Okay.
What I did is I highlighted anything that was significant in the current budget. So anything that I thought was maybe going to be over, under, or break out just about even is what I noted here. First thing is the vehicles repair and maintenance. Unfortunately, we had to replace an engine in one of our cruisers this year. That's a major repair, and it was very costly to do that. So that ended up, instead of being at 50%, it put our vehicle maintenance budget up to 76% utilization halfway through the year. So that's something that I'm anticipating may end up going into a deficit as we continue through the year because of that major expense that is definitely not something we normally experience. Next item is medical expenses. This year we had eight officers leave the department. It was a combination of retirements, resignations. That's an unusually high number, but not unusual in policing these days. We're seeing a lot of turnover, and hiring has become challenging. So with that, we aggressively were trying to hire officers to fill those positions. We ended up screening 8 candidates. This is the medical screening we're required to do. It's also psychological. It costs us $665 to screen each candidate, and that utilized that entire budget line item. However, we've also exhausted in the process our new hire list, and there won't be a new one issued through civil service until after the next fiscal year, so I don't anticipate any issues with that line item. We're done using it for this year. The next item has to do with K-9 expenses and supplies. Going into the year, we had 3 K-9s. 2 of them have resigned. We're down to 1 K-9 at this point, so there's no issues at all with that particular line item. They left the department earlier in the year. Gasoline prices have been reasonable. I don't see any issue at all with gasoline unless somehow there's a major spike in pricing. We've transitioned fairly well the fleet over to hybrid cruisers. There was a situation where Ford was not able to provide those for about a year-long period, year and a half. We did purchase a few gas cars during that time. It was the only option we had, and our cars needed to be replaced. We did try to put those vehicles into positions where it would limit their fuel usage to not have any detrimental effect on the gas supply. We're also expecting the arrival of an fully electric police cruiser. That'll be put into patrol use to test and see how that functions in that role. So it's just one at this time, and we'll talk more about that a little later, but essentially it's for testing just to see if it's able to function properly in a role as a fully marked patrol cruiser.
So just, where would you recharge that?
We have a charging station at the police
police
department,
station,
yeah. It's not one of the high-speed ones. We did apply for a grant through Eversource. We were told that was pushed off. It didn't make the first round. They're very expensive for the fast chargers. But ultimately, if we were gonna use these things kind of around the clock, that's what you would need. That can charge the car back up in about 10 minutes for what it would use in one shift on patrol. The current charger would take closer to 2.5, 3 hours, depending on how far the officer drove.
I do have another question.
Sure.
Got to do with the purchasing of the hybrid. Do you go, is it a factory order, or you have to go through a dealer? How exactly do you procure that? Those
Sure.
hybrids?
So we purchased the hybrids just the same way we do the regular cars. They're made through Ford.
Yeah.
It's the Ford, same exact car. Looking at it, you wouldn't know the difference. It's just the hybrid version of the Ford Explorer, basically, is what it is.
So you put your order right into the factory? You
Yes.
don't go through any third party, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yep, we order them the exact same way as you order the gas cars.
Okay. Gotcha.
Brian, of the resignations, was there any pattern to the reasons why people left?
I think the only pattern, I could recognize is, so we do lose people to the state police on occasion. It's been about one per year, relatively consistent
like
over the
the
last few
uniforms
years. What's that?
They like the uniforms better?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
that blue-gray, huh?
Yeah.
The other thing is just in policing, it's been a difficult climate, and I think some of the officers, because we've seen some officers with 10 and even less years on, resign, which is extremely unusual. So I think they just get involved in the climate and they don't like it, so they decide to just change career paths.
Could I ask one last question?
Sure.
It's somewhat unrelated, but will you replace the canines? Will you bring more on?
Well, we're evaluating that currently. We're down to one. But one of the things we've been utilizing more and more these days, quite honestly, is the drones. And that there's a lot of overlap there with drones and canines. A lot of what we do is look for people.
Yeah.
And the drones have, they can see heat signatures and stuff like that. Also from the air, they get a bigger view. So, but with the canine on the ground, it's still very useful. I don't want to say it's not needed, because it kind of is. A lot of times with canopies, tree canopies and stuff, the drone is not able to penetrate through that. And we have people who are either searching for, lost, whatever it may be. We want to be able to find those people as quickly as we can. So we've been having luck utilizing both of those tools together.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Traffic supervisor salary, so that position, this is going back into last year now, we were unable to fill those positions. What we ended up doing was utilizing a combination of our traffic safety division police officers, having them at the schools in the morning and in the afternoon, when the schools, the children are getting there and leaving, to do traffic enforcement, make sure the cars are driving slow, coupled with the school department basically having crossing guards where needed. We've basically eliminated those positions, so I'm not going to be requesting funding for that item this year. Professional salaries, I anticipate that will be in a bit of a deficit this year due to two factors. One of them was the deputy chief, who we anticipated would have been retired by the time the new budget took effect. That did not happen. There was a delay, so he ended up getting paid out through the budget that didn't include his salary. And then there was also contractual raises that I received along with the deputy chiefs. The contract was settled after the budget had been approved, so that funding was not included in that budget. Dispatch salaries and overtime was at 75% utilization instead of the 50 we anticipated it being at. However, that position is underfunded in the budget each year, and we rely on grant funding from the 911 grants, and that grant money is utilized to make up the difference in those salaries, so I don't anticipate any issues by the end of the year. There's just some lag time in between when we apply for the grant, get approved, and then start getting the money returned to us. So it looks bad for a while, and then it gets better before the end of the year. Police officer salaries was in surplus. I anticipate the surplus continuing to the end of the year. I put in an estimate there, it's just an estimate. That's obviously due to the shortage of police officers. We budget for being fully staffed, and this year, we were not fully staffed. Overtime pay, I'm anticipating a deficit in that account. Obviously, once again, due to the shortage of police officers, we have to, have the officers that are there working more, which leads to higher overtime costs. At the end of the day, looking at the whole budget, I don't anticipate having to request any additional funding. And just as in prior years, I do anticipate turning back money to the town, mostly resulting from being understaffed with police officers.
Chief?
Yes.
How will you, or can you, or is it possible to address not being able to have enough police officers on the force?
Well, one of the things we're doing now, well, there's a lot of things we're doing, really, to be honest with you, because it's a problem, but it's a problem for all the agencies around. I don't know if you noticed the article, New Bedford's looking to hire, I think, 50 police officers. So it's not just something that we're doing. What we're trying to do in working with the town is just be as competitive as possible. And that's with salaries, benefits, stuff like that. I think the town's come a long way with the insurance. For us, that was a big issue for a long time. People would be interested in coming to Dartmouth. And when they found out the insurance costs, health insurance, that is, that would be detrimental to them wanting to make the step over. So that's one of the things, just maintaining a competitive environment is important to get police officers. But the other issue is, like I said earlier, about the list being expired. We've exhausted the list. That's a civil service list. Right now, we're constrained to hiring just off civil service list. And they've been giving the test more often. I understand they're going to give the test twice a year now versus once a year. So they also recognize the issue, and they're taking steps to make it a better process. They're also soon going to finalize what they call their hybrid model, which, if we accept it, will allow us to hire 50% of officers from outside of civil service. So we'd be eligible to hire people who were not on the civil service list, including laterals from other departments potentially. That's not in effect yet, but I am anticipating in the next 6 months or so, we'll be able to start doing that.
So it sounds like really, until they make these sort of changes, unless the town can figure out some way to, well, you can't really, I guess, under civil service, pay more to be more competitive, nothing is going to happen because the situation's not going to change.
Yeah, I mean, the higher pay, people do have a choice when they take the exam, which department they're gonna work for, And so what we want to do is we want to make sure we're one of their top picks, essentially, to keep getting people attracted to come working for us, so.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, you referenced the health insurance. Are you saying that health insurances that the police department are engaged in are not competitive or more expensive than the other ones in this region? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like you said, what I was saying is it's gotten a lot better after that last change, the most recent change the town made to the health insurance with the high deductible plan mostly.
Okay.
But the industry standard kind of out there, and this was even in the salary study that was done, I'm going to say compensation study that was done maybe in 2019. The town had paid for that study, and what that showed is most of the towns were kind of a 25-75 with health insurance. And at that point, we were much higher, I think around maybe 46 or 48%. But there's been a lot of changes made in the last year and a half with the high deductible plan. That's made it a lot more competitive as far as the health insurance goes.
Okay.
So who do you typically liaise with in the town's government to report back on things like shortage of police officers and what you just outlined in terms of changes in civil service? What I'm trying to figure out is that I don't think we want to, this is not against you, but I don't think we want to be hearing that we don't have enough police officers again a year from now.
Right.
So
yeah.
Who do you liaise with to try and make changes that will attract more people to work for the Dartmouth Police?
Sure. So, the HR director is someone obviously who's, very involved with hiring in the town, as well as the town administrator, the select board. Also through the Brotherhood Union, who negotiates with the town for better pay, benefits, stuff like that. All of that helps us to be more competitive. So that's the majority of the ways we're doing it. Internally, I try to foster a good work environment, because word travels as far as which departments are good and which ones aren't so good. And that's where, once we can open the door for this lateral transfers, okay, I'm hoping to be able to have officers, experienced officers who may want to come and work in Dartmouth. Right now, it's not an option. It's an option technically, but the problem is that the chief of police, wherever the department they're working in, needs to agree to allow the officer to leave under civil service. And where there's a shortage everywhere, no chief, including myself, is not going to let an officer leave because you need that officer essentially, and they're hard to replace.
At what point does it become a crisis in terms of not having enough folks around, even if you're spending overtime?
Sure.
Are we anywhere near that?
Well, so an update on that. So at our worst point during the year, we were down 12 officers. Since that time, we've just had 4 last month graduate the academy, and 2 more last month entered the academy. So currently, we're down 7. And like I said, there's nothing I can do right now until either the hybrid model is fully approved and functional, or the test results come back out in July, and we can work off of a new list. But as far as crisis, I don't think we're at a crisis yet, to be honest with you. I think we're slowly improving, and I'm hoping for a better year this year. Like I said, losing 10 officers in 1 year was unusual. It was like the engine issue we had, right? So it was just a bad year for cars and officers. But that's not the norm, and as long as we can continue to make ground on that, I think we'll be in good shape.
Chief, if I could, does the staffing shortage lead to a lot of forcing, or is it more taking you from an optimal level down to a minimum manning, point?
Sure, it does both, So we staff the shifts with more officers. We do have a minimum manning number that we feel is the minimum that we're comfortable, having on the road at one particular time. But we put extra officers on shift when we can, because first, it provides better coverage, but the second thing, we also have to allow for time off. The officers have time off, and so if we schedule 8 officers, let's say, for a shift, and 2 of them take the day off, right, it quickly diminishes. So to answer your question, essentially, we work with less officers. We're closer to the minimums on a lot of days. In addition to that, although it's offered as overtime, voluntary overtime first, if we can't fill it, in order to maintain the minimums that we've agreed upon, we will force officers to work, and that has happened quite often.
Okay. How many police cruisers do we have?
Well, to answer that, you marked police cruisers? You're talking about?
Yeah, all right, just a general number, unmarked, marked, in total.
Total in our fleet?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably about 60,
60.
62 maybe, right around there. Yeah, we have a lot of different type of vehicles, marked, unmarked, spare cars, command posts, motorcycles. There's a lot of different types
And
of
that one
vehicles.
that you replaced the engine for 17,000, how old was that cruiser?
That wasn't that old. That was only about maybe 4 or 5 years old, but the mileage was like 65,000 miles. Now, in defense of the manufacturer, I mean, when I say miles, and I'll talk about this a little more later, but our mileage is a little misleading because the way we use cars, we spend a lot of time idling the engines, and which does wear the engines, okay? So Ford actually has like a conversion of idle hours, which we track, and then you can take the mileage and you can convert it to the actual mileage, the wear and tear on the engine, and it's usually like double whatever we're quoting for mileage. So that 65 quickly becomes like 130,000 miles when you account for idle hours. And that particular vehicle was a K9 vehicle, and those idle even more than the regular cruisers because of the dog in them. They need to run the HVAC, around the clock whenever the dog's in the car.
So how often would you say you had to turn over a car based on what you just said?
So our goal is to keep the car at least 10 years.
10 years.
10 years at minimum, and we normally exceed that, to be honest with you. We have a good maintenance program, and the guys take accountability for the vehicles, and they take good care of them. So we're usually able to get more than 10 years, and we look for somewhere around 120,000 miles or so. And like I said, that's closer to like 250,000. And a lot of times they're harder miles, because the cars are being used in a way that's a little rougher than the normal car being used.
I do have a pressing question. Why wasn't the engine on warranty if it was under 100,000 miles?
Because the car was 5 years old.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
combination of mileage
fair.
and in years.
yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to talk about the new budget?
Yeah.
Moving on, new budget, okay. So in the new budget, I've kind of highlighted some things here that are going to be different, essentially, what I'm looking for. And so one of them is a request that I have in the budget. It's included in the budget, and it's for a additional sergeant's position. This sergeant's position would assist in the Special Operations Division. This division has 15 officers assigned to it in various units, including investigations, community impact unit, training, traffic safety, firearms licensing, and school resource officers. The division is currently supervised by 1 lieutenant and 1 sergeant. Now, the way our department is set up, the patrol division I'm talking about now, we have 3 different reliefs, days, evenings, and midnights. Each relief is staffed by a number of officers, but it's supervised by a lieutenant and 2 sergeants. And the number of officers ranges between 10 to 15 per relief, depending on our staffing. If we're at full staffing, then it would be 15. Where we are now, it's closer to 10 or 11, depending on what shift we're talking about. I've had the request made from the lieutenant in charge of special operations. He sees the need for the sergeant. I support that in kind of looking over the division, all the various things they do. It's difficult for 1 lieutenant and 1 sergeant to properly supervise that size unit. It's also comparable to any of the different patrol reliefs, and this would align us with the same format and supervision of the patrol division by adding that additional sergeant. And I have a little more information on that I'll get to a little bit later. But what I did essentially is look at other departments and kind of look at the officer to supervisor ratio just to see where we fit in overall as a department. So I have those a little later in the presentation. The next thing has to do with the K-9. As I spoke about, I have no immediate plans of adding any K-9s at this time. We're going to evaluate the need. Traffic supervisors will not be filled. I won't be asking for any additional funding on that. The deputy chief I spoke about earlier did retire in October, so that will not be any continuing issue with funding on that. This budget does contain the 7 officer vacancies. I try to anticipate retirements. I ask officers if they plan to retire. That's something that I think the town likes to know, to plan. I had 2 officers who indicated that they would most likely be retiring during FY '26, and 1 officer potentially leaving for another department. So filling these positions does take time, so I'm anticipating things will continue where we have, essentially a deficit with the overtime pay, but we're going to have an overage with the officer salaries as we continue to work to fill these positions. The new budget overall is very similar to last year's budget, as the Brotherhood and DTA, those are both the unions that work for the police department, have not negotiated any changes in pay at this time. So there's no regular COLA or whatnot increases in this budget because they don't have any new contracts that would cover that time period. I made adjustments in the expense area. What I did is I did a review of the current expenses, and I moved money around. If I had excess in one place, I basically put it all into our software. We've talked about before upgrading our CAD RMS, which is our dispatch software and our records management software. That's kind of the heart and soul of what we do. We use that software every day. It's basically, like I said, it's the main software that runs the police department. We're looking to upgrade that. Money has been allocated through the town's ARPA funding for that upgrade. However, with any software, there's continuing maintenance costs that you incur. These maintenance costs are quite a bit higher than the current software we run. So by looking at the expenses, any money that was potentially a savings in any category, I've reallocated it to the software fund. With that being said, once we get this up and running, I may need additional funding to pay these annual fees, and I put it up to $30,000 in there, just trying to estimate how much additional funding I may need to ask for in the future. That's not this year, but when I come back next year, I'll see where the numbers really fall. However, this year, we did install a backup device. What this backup device does is it backs up all of the data we have into the cloud, and that has a cost of $21,576 per year. So that's an additional cost that I did include in this year's budget under the expenses. Online backups, I'm sure, especially, I know some of you have an IT background, you know the importance of that. With all the different cyber attacks going on these days, the last thing we want to do is have an issue where we lose data. So we think that's important. Working with the town's IT director, we had that device installed.
So, excuse me, didn't you do an upgrade last year? I thought you did an upgrade last year, no?
We talked about an upgrade.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. This, I mean, obviously, changing our CAD RMS software is a big deal, so it might have even been 2 years I've been talking about it for a long time.
No, cybersecurity, man, that's affecting all the towns, towns, police, and particularly police, because if somebody can get into those files, it won't be a nice situation.
Yeah, I mean, we were just notified today, a vendor we utilized was under attack, and they were compromised, so it happens everywhere, federal government, state governments.
Brian, I'm looking at the totals and staffing. So there are 81 budgeted police officers right now. Is that,
74.
I see 74 and 7 vacancies. Is that, the 7 is included in the 74?
Yes.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah.
So you're not requesting any more police officers next year? You just like to fill the openings you have?
Correct.
And you're looking at 1 administrative increase? Is that right? Is that a sergeant?
The sergeant's position,
Would
yeah.
be +1. Are there any
Yeah.
other increases in terms of FTEs?
No.
Okay,
Nope.
thank you.
Yeah, when we get to the page with the organizational chart, I
Yeah.
kind of break down what we have staffing and then what we have for vacancies.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so there's the expenses. I set this up under the new format,
Yeah, no, it looks
so
great.
a little more historical perspective.
Because I've been saying for a while, because you always talk budget, but if you don't understand actuals, it's impossible to understand the
Right.
budgets. So I like 22, 23, 24.
That's good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, excellent.
So just a quick summary, most of the expenses are gonna stay level funded. As you can see, what I had done is I moved some money into the software, and some of that came from the lockup charges. I looked back historically at the actuals, saw what that was, and I felt comfortable moving that amount into software, which is the $10,100. We've been really steady with our arrests. So what that fee is we pay the sheriff's department essentially to watch people we arrest until they can go to court. So that's what that was. And then there was some clothing that was previously associated with the traffic supervisors, so I reallocated that into the software budget. And then also I added in that online backup, which led to the $21,576 increase overall in the budget.
Okay, want to go to the next one there with the salaries?
So some of the major goals. Some of this has to do with the budget and some has to do with capital requests. The first one is back on the sergeant's position that I spoke about earlier. I'll just kind of go over what's new here. I anticipate that's going to cost about an additional $20,000 in salaries to fund that position. Down at the bottom, under the metric section is the analysis of the 12 comparable departments. Showed an average ratio of 1 supervisor for every 2.6 officers. At full staffing, if we had the 74 officers, our ratio currently would be 1 supervisor to every 3.9 officers. With the 7 vacancies we have, we're at 1 supervisor for every 3.5. That additional supervisor, if approved, would bring the ratio down to 1 to every 3.7 at full staffing, or 1 to every 3.3 officers at current staffing. The comparable departments range, this is supervisor to officer ratio, was 1 supervisor to every 1.8 up to a high of 1 to every 3.2 was the range. So if we could add that additional supervisor, that would get us very, very close to being inside of that range. We had the lowest ratio, or the highest ratio, however you look at it, of all the comparables.
Chief, I have a question.
Sure.
On the sergeant's position, last year, I believe you had some statistics on the overall effect of policing in Dartmouth on crimes, et cetera. As it relates to that sergeant's position and the goal of ensuring that we maintain our effectiveness at crime reduction, how do you know after you hired this person that they're actually contributing to that? In other words, can we expect reasonably to see some of those stats that you showed last year? But I presume you have this year as well.
I do,
because
yeah.
You chose to show them. How do we see that it's actually effective having that one extra person?
Yeah, I don't know that we can, to be honest with you. We do track it, and we'll go into the metrics later where we talk about our crime statistics and so forth. But to get down to that level, saying, hey, this one sergeant really made a difference in crime, I don't think I'm going to be able to say that one way or the other, to be honest with you. But the way I look at it is, with the current climate in policing, we're being asked to do more now than ever, and we're being scrutinized more now than ever. And so I'm prioritizing supervision of officers. We've also, with the high turnover, we've got a lot of newer officers who are going to definitely need a closer level of supervision, because I've also got to be concerned about liability. So not only being effective, on the road and getting the job done and reducing crime, but we also want to make sure we're doing things according to the law, not violating anyone's rights. And a lot of that comes down to proper supervision.
Right. Did you, maybe I missed it, did you include any stats this year on gross statistics on reduction in crime, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't usually include them. I have a presentation on that. After the budget, I usually go into the metrics.
Oh, great. Are
but
you
I
going to do
don't
that tonight?
Yes.
Oh, terrific.
Yep.
Excellent.
Chief, these ratios, do they fall in line with other police departments throughout the area around here, the supervisor to police officer ratio, or how do we compare with that?
Yeah, so that was the last part of the metrics that I had spoken about. We do not compare very favorably to that. We had the worst ratio.
Oh, the worst?
The worst.
So what is the average ratio then?
So the average was 1 supervisor to every 2.6 officers.
Oh, okay, this is okay. Comparable, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was mentioned, thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, generally, smaller departments sometimes will have a better ratio just because you need like a minimum number of supervisors just to run a shift. So their ratio, like we would never get down to like, one supervisor to every 2 officers, and some departments have that and even lower. I would never recommend getting to that level. But some departments that are smaller have to do that just so they can run the shift and have a supervisor working.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next goal is talking about.
Susan has a question.
So on the new sergeant position you're looking for, how do I justify to, we got to make a recommendation at town meeting that you're adding another administrator to the department? With the department is not fully staffed or down, so you're not increasing staff, but you want to, a lot of people, we're making another department top-heavy, we're adding another supervisory position, and we're down on the front lines.
Right.
How do we justify that at town meeting? I don't see, where's the cost savings to the taxpayer to say, okay, it makes sense to add the sergeant, or well, a lot of people have used this, are we just rewarding somebody for a good job and giving them a position? I'm trying to avoid, because I have a feeling someone's going to ask that question at town meeting.
Sure.
How do we respond to that if we recommend favorably to adding a new sergeant?
Yep. So the first thing I'd say is, as far as when we actually make this move, so you guys are approving a budget that doesn't take effect until July, and it takes me all the way till basically the following July of 2027, right? We're talking about here, or 2026, I'm sorry. So this doesn't mean, I'm obviously not gonna do this tomorrow, because I won't even have the funding tomorrow, but sometime when I feel staffing is adequate, I would then have the flexibility to make that move. Like I said, we just graduated 4 officers from the academy, they're in field training now, we put 2 more in, and I'm hoping to continue to hire. And if we can get this hybrid program up and running, potentially get some lateral officers, that dramatically reduces the delay on getting officers on the road, because the academy is almost 5-6 months long. And you have to wait until an academy starts. Plus, these officers, if they have experience, the field training is much shorter duration because they're already experienced.
I believe, if I'm understanding you right, though, we're currently understaffed, and to be
Yes.
fully staffed, that number is 74
Yes.
officers. And at 74 officers, when we had 74 officers, were you running under the current command structure where the administrative and supervisory roles were there? Are we down there also? Again, how do we justify no increase in staffing, even though you plan on hiring?
Yeah.
We had 74 officers before, and they were adequately staffed, so I'm assuming they were adequately staffed. There was no requests for increased administration, so how do we justify that now, where you're only going back to the old numbers where you were before, and yet you're adding another administrator?
Yeah.
I'm looking for, is there gonna be a cost reduction somewhere because, we're adding that sergeant position?
Sure.
We're more efficient because of that position.
Yep. So a couple of things there just to kind of talk about is, so the number 74 is a number that, quite honestly, we're rarely at. If you look back historically, that's our goal. But because of the delay when an officer leaves to hiring an officer, getting the officer trained, I don't know, if we end up hitting 74 officers, it doesn't last long usually, because then we have someone else leaving. See, I'm not able to hire people ahead of time. Even back when, essentially we had a lot of candidates looking to. I'm not able to hire them ahead of time. So there's always a lag between when somebody leaves and when we hire somebody. And in any given year, we usually have between 2 and 3 officers that leave the department. Some years, as you saw, like last year, it went up quite a bit. So to say that we're at 74 and we were fine with the supervisors, we were probably not at 74. We might have been a little higher than we are now, but it's usually not 74 is the number. As far as savings go, what I'm stressing now is the need for increased supervision due to the demands that are being placed on policing. So it's not going to be a savings, maybe like you're thinking about it, with some kind of increase in, revenue or something. We don't necessarily generate revenue, is not our objective. I'm talking about reducing liability. And that can be an extremely expensive cost, liability-wise. And one of the things that could be attacked is a lack of proper supervision. And that's why I'm requesting this additional position. This has come from my own observations, looking at comparable department data, as well as the request from the division supervisor, the lieutenant currently in that division, who's been there now for a while, has extensive experience in those particular units, who's telling me, requesting to me, I could really use another supervisor up here to help out.
So in your narrative, you say, in justifying your new sergeant position, proper oversight can increase efficiency of this division. So can you put a cost associated with that increased efficiency? Are we, so again, we can, there's a number that we can justify. You're asking for
20,000.
20,000. So because of this new oversight and the increase in efficiency, are you saving 60,000? And that, is there, and I know it would be just a guesstimate, but something to offset that expense that will.
I think I heard you say avoiding liability.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and I guess the second part of that answer could also be, when I talk about efficiency, so what we do is, we're not a business in the sense that we sell products, okay? What we do is we try to reduce crime, right? That's kind of our goal, or at least keep it about the same, right? And so what I'm looking at is becoming more effective and efficient in what we do, not raising money necessarily, because that's not really what we do. I mean, we do raise money, but it's not our objective to raise money. We don't go out and target people to give them tickets, let's say, to raise money. So there will never be something in numbers where you're gonna get back that $20,000, in other words, that I can put my finger on anyways. I'm not gonna know about the lawsuits that didn't happen, or maybe the ones that were successful in defending, I would know about those.
I understand that, but your point is a good point, that if you can keep crime on a downhill slope versus on an upward slope, there's some value there.
Sure. But not a number.
No, but there's value, and
Sure.
people will get, okay, I understand why.
So town meeting would like that because the slope of the curve on how you're going to show crime decreasing can be attributed to better supervision and avoiding liability.
So really, you can't really apply, to your point, a metric to this to say, okay, if I hire a new sergeant, whatever, our crime rate's gonna go down. You can't do it because you really don't have the data to support that metric. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the thing about crime is this, so there's so many variables that are outside of our control, and we're gonna talk about the metrics later, and you might have more questions about crime, but, there's a lot going on that we have no control over, okay? In the recent article in the paper, I guess Fall River got a major grant, and what they do is they bus homeless into the motels in Dartmouth, okay? Could that increase our crime? If they bring 50 more people into town, potentially, right? So it's stuff like that we don't have any control over. And there's also crime versus reported crime, right? Sometimes a lot of the stores are struggling right now, right? And what do? They cut their loss prevention. So does shoplifting go down? Probably not, but what goes down is the reported shoplifting because they have less people out there reporting it to us.
Okay, we gotta move on,
Yeah.
Okay.
because we're running out of time here.
Okay? All right, so goal number 2 is an equipment request for the Axon's TASER 10. We currently have the TASER 7. It's an important piece of equipment for us. Sometimes it's the last option we have before we move up the use of force, sometimes up to as high as deadly force. We've had successful uses with the TASER. We've had it for quite a while now. They come out with new models every so many years. It's been shown to reduce injury to not only officers, but also subjects as well. Right now, I'm looking at a 5-year lease, which ends up with the department owning the TASERs. The cost goes up a little each year, but I averaged it out to the $37,850. That's the average cost. In the CIP page in this, it'll detail the cost of every year, but that's just the average of those years. Okay. Next item is storage of our patrol rifles in the cruisers. This request is based on officer feedback. We currently have a storage system, and there's been some issues with consistency, reliability, and so forth. So what we're looking to do is move to a simpler system, basically a box, a vault. It's called a truck vault. It goes in the cars. It has a locking mechanism on it that doesn't require electronics or batteries. And the new cruisers are being built with these boxes now. We have cruisers still coming in. There was a lot of delay in getting cars, so we have at least 3 or 4 more coming in still. They will have the boxes. In addition to that, I'm looking to retrofit 8 of our cruisers. That way, no matter which cruiser the officer gets into, with the cars we have that are shared, they would have the same configuration. There'd be no confusion over different systems and different cars. Obviously, if they're going to retrieve an item like that, it's important. There's something serious going on. I want that to be as seamless and standardized as possible, so I'm requesting that funding to retrofit those 8 cars. This is the operating budget.
Okay.
There's some changes that are noted, including the amount and percentages. The majority of these changes based on contractual obligations. It could be COLA increases, step increases. It's mostly contractual. The part under expenses is what we talked about earlier. That's the online backup device. In some categories, there's some savings. In other categories, there's increases. And like I said, it's contractual.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Well, and this is a kind of a question for Gary, too. So FY '25 estimate actuals, okay, no, I'm sorry, maybe I read that wrong. I was looking at actuals versus the request, but it's actually
Yeah, FY '24 is the most
FY
recent
'26 over
actual.
'25, so it's 248,000, 2.6% overall budget
Yes,
requests.
yep.
Anybody have any questions on that?
Okay.
The capital budget?
This is the capital budget with the details. Like I said, the TASER 10 is a 5-year lease. At the end of the lease, you own the device, and it goes up each year. The rest of the costs are basically the combination of patrol cruisers and admin vehicles that we've been adhering to. It's the same schedule.
So do you replace your tasers every year? Is that,
No, what happens is we would lease, in this case, 20 of these tasers. And you pay that lease each year, and at the end of the lease, you own the devices.
okay,
So it's the same device though for the 5 years. And then at the end, you own them.
Is there any resale on the old tasers, the Taser 7s that phase out?
So what we do with the TASER 7s is, right now, most of the officers share the tasers. The officers on patrol, we want them to have the newest, the best technology. So what they do is, so in some departments, a lot of departments that issue every officer their own taser, okay? But it's very expensive because this price you're seeing just for 20 tasers. And the way we do that is we have the officers share the tasers. But this is the patrol officers. Officers in specialized units, we do assign them tasers, and we assign them the old tasers. So right now, we have the previous to the TASER 7 was the X26. So we're still utilizing X26s with those officers in specialty positions. They'll be upgraded to the TASER 7s. The patrol officers will be upgraded to the TASER 10s. And there's not a ton of resale value, to be honest with you, in them. So that's one of the reasons we try to reuse them as well.
But they go on, they have another life, so that's good.
you want to go into cost reductions?
If the,
Well, I mean, any questions on
No.
on that?
No.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Right, so cost reductions. The first 3 items listed, the first 2 items listed are just things we're looking at. We've had meetings with different companies, stuff like that. These are very, very new technologies, and so we're slowly just kind of getting accustomed to them, learning more about them. I can see some future savings if they kind of pan out, let's say. The AI, the reporting, you know, I notated in there how often officers spend time writing these reports. Some of this artificial intelligence, what it does is, since we use body-worn cameras, it will actually go through and analyze the entire video, and then it will kind of summarize for the officer. Now, the officer needs to go in, and they need to add things to the report. They need to review the report. We have to see what the courts are going to think about that. So I'm not ready to purchase that yet, but I can certainly see a big benefit to that if that's something that ends up being acceptable in the state.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and it works pretty well. They have it tuned, so it's very cautious about, you know, what it sees, and if it's not sure about something, it's not going to talk about it, or it's going to prompt the officer to enter more information about something. Drone as a first responder, we have drones. In this particular case, what these drones do is they sit in kind of a remote enclosure, and they can be deployed basically from anywhere, and they fly to the scene, and they provide, you know, oversight of the scene. a lot of times before the officers even get there. So that's something that we're interested in at some point. Some departments use them, not a lot at this point, but there are departments that use these things, and they have found it to be effective, because you do get there a lot of times ahead of the officer. You know, they can fly 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and they can go direct, and there's no traffic and no issues. And they get there and they have a viewpoint, a vantage point that the officer doesn't have. So that's something we're looking at, because, you know, we're talking about this shortage of officers. How can we become more efficient? How can we potentially work with less officers if that need ever arises? And I think it's going to be through some of these technologies. But I also want to be cautious, because this stuff is new, and it's expensive as well. So we're trying to balance out, does it make sense to make that purchase and spend that kind of money? Item number 3.
So in the future, you'd have to have somebody either trained to run that, or add a person, right? I mean, because
I mean,
that's pretty sophisticated.
We have officers trained to run that, and honestly, they make it very simple. The devices we've been looking at now, they know where our calls for service are in real time, and you press a button, and the thing, it'll fly to it automatically. So they're relatively easy to use, but we do have officers trained to fly drones, because we have drones currently.
Good.
Item number 3, the CAD RMS upgrade. We talked about that. That's something that I think is going to help us as well. It's got a lot of new features. Our system is old and doesn't have some of these more modern features. One of the ones that comes to mind, I'll just highlight one of them. It's AVL, automatic vehicle location. In dispatch, they'll be able to see where all the cruisers are. And then the system can make suggestions as to which cruisers should respond. And it could be either the area car, or if it's a priority call, it could use the cruisers that are closest to that call to respond. So that's just one way to kind of reduce some of the load even on our dispatches and get us to be a little more efficient and responsive to these calls. Electric vehicles, we talked a little bit about that, but essentially, you know, we do extensive time idling, which puts additional wear and tear on our cars. EVs do not suffer from any kind of idling. They also require much less maintenance. So that's something we're looking at trying, if we could get those DC fast charges, hopefully through an Eversource type grant. That would really move that program forward, with allowing us to charge those vehicles in the time it takes to do a roll call. So there would be essentially no downtime. And then we've been experimenting with the ALPR, the automated plate readers. That's another way to help reduce crime and/or solve crime. We've had luck recovering stolen vehicles utilizing that, and also solving crimes with that technology.
Chief, I noticed you're looking for a grant from Eversource. When the new station was built, there was no infrastructure put in to accommodate future EV vehicles.
Yeah, so the EV, these fast charges that I'm talking about, so we had to have plans drawn up preliminary to apply for this grant. The way these work is they have to actually tap into the transformers. So they're not gonna run the line from like our circuit breaker room to these EVs. They take so much power for these fast charges, they have to actually tap directly into the line, the poles. So we don't have any of that infrastructure in place.
How many would you need?
So we applied for a grant. It was 2 units, and each unit can support 2 vehicles, so 4 cars in total. And that would probably go a long way for getting that turned around in the time we needed it. And then you could use the slower chargers when you had a little more time. When you had an hour, 2, 3 hours, you could use the slow. It'd be a combination of both charges would be ideal to make that program
So,
work.
Chief, is there a particular person that keeps track of these grants and administers them, or whatever the right terms might be?
It's different people depending on what the grant is. So for this particular grant, the town has an energy manager, and we worked with her as well as Chris Vitale, the assistant town administrator. He handles grants for the town. We do some grants, in-house grants, like the 911 grant I talked about, and there's more information on grants later on. But yeah, it's different people depending on what the grant is.
Do you feel, just out of curiosity, do you feel that you're maximizing the potential of grants that could help keep the costs down? Or do you need perhaps more support to do grants, or?
Yeah, I mean, we do it to the best of our ability. I don't have a full-time grant person just working on grants, because, you know, the first thing with grants is you have to find them, right? And then you have to
Right.
apply for them, and some of them are pretty extensive.
And they're hard to write.
Right. So I don't have a full-time person dedicated to grant. I don't have that kind of personnel to do that, but we do the best we can, finding grants and utilizing when we can. So if the town has assistance they want to offer, I certainly welcome any grant money that's out there.
So could you, not holding you to anything, you could identify other grants that we might be able to get, assuming you had more grant support, whatever that means, within the town infrastructure?
Yeah, well, that was one of the issues, is identifying these grants.
Right.
That takes a person to do that too. You know, we do the best we can to find the ones we can find. There's some that we utilize year after year. Those are the ones that we're pretty familiar with, and we continue to use them. But there are some that come up. There's a lot that we don't qualify for. A lot of them target bigger departments, cities, stuff like that. We've looked into some of those, but we just don't qualify.
But you have to, somebody has to physically wade through all that stuff to find out whether you qualify or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Revenue worksheet?
Okay, revenue. So over here, we have what we've actually collected, and that's from FY '24, and then we just do the best we can to kind of estimate. I usually try to underestimate a little bit. It was $346,812 in FY '24. It fluctuates a little year to year, depending on how many details we have, how many tickets we write, stuff like that. Those are some of our bigger ways to create revenue. License to carries is a fee that's charged for that we share with the state. We sell accident reports, issue parking fines.
Did you say you had metrics, or
I do. Yep.
can you go through those kind of quick, or, okay?
Yep.
So I want to get the library up here.
Yep, understood. So the grants, that's just a summary, you have that in front of you. In total, we got $246,778 in state and federal grant funding, 911 training, support and incentives, bulletproof vest reimbursements, and traffic enforcement. That's the last slide.
So for those these are ones you're going to go after this year?
Yep.
And then who's charged, do you monitor how you're doing with those grants in your department, or do you go through the town administration to monitor them?
Well, we apply for those grants, and we're awarded them, so we monitor it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
because we're the applicant, and we disperse the funding as well, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, metrics. These are our calls for service over the last 10 years. You can see the average. It doesn't fluctuate a ton year to year. I don't put too much weight on these because depending on whatever we're doing in a particular year, a lot of times if it's certain properties we need to check on, it can make a difference of hundreds of calls per year. So it depends on what's going on around town. We'll get into the crime data next, which I put more weight on than just the calls for service, but it's something that departments track, and it's nice to look at, so. These are some of the bigger activities that we get involved in. Car accidents, how many people we arrest, citations that are issued, firearms licenses that are issued, motor vehicle stops that we do, offense reports, traffic enforcement warrants. We kind of highlight these because number one, we have the metrics to track them, and number two, they take a little more time than just, calling. A call for service is generated anytime we're involved in anything. So these have stayed fairly consistent over the years. There is a little variation year by year. Citations might be down. If we had less grant money to do targeted enforcement, that could be one reason why citations go down. A second reason is manpower. That's something that officers do in between calls. If they have a lot of calls or less officers, they have less time to be issuing traffic citations. Is the crime data, crimes against persons. These are the more serious crimes. That was up 9% over the last year. So sometimes this data can be a little bit misleading as well. Because like I said, different things influence crime. And if we're more effective at detecting crime, enforcing crime, it could actually have the effect of raising the number up. And that's definitely going to be the case when we talk about an operation we did in one of the next slides. So this particular one, if you look at the, kind of the average, there's not a ton of difference from the average. It's down from last year, though, okay, but it is a little higher than the average. And so that's what the 9% is comparing itself to. The next type of crime is property crimes. This is down, and like I said, I don't necessarily like to take credit for some of these things, because I do think a lot of the stores are struggling. One of the biggest property crimes we deal with is shoplifting in town. We have a lot of stores, and we have a lot of shoplifting. But when the stores do less enforcement, because they have to cut personnel for budgetary reasons, sometimes the people they cut is a loss prevention, and we just get less calls for the property crimes. I don't think it's really going down. I think we're just hearing less about it. Crimes against society. So that one has a big increase. And that's what I was talking about earlier. So we did 2 stings at the motels, prostitution stings, and that led to at least 10 arrests that were made. And so that's going to have a big impact on that particular number. But in this particular case, it's a good thing, because we're actually out there proactively trying to catch people. The drug unit's been fairly active too, and some of that has to do with drug crimes. This is just everything on one page. There's nothing new here. Arrest data. This is 3 years of data, just to show, where the people reside, who we arrest. Because of the town, the way it's set up, we have the motels, we have businesses, restaurants, it attracts people from neighboring communities. So in this particular case, actually, we arrested more people who were New Bedford residents than Dartmouth residents by a small margin. And, they're much larger populations, so they have people who come into town. One thing I like to do is compare us to Bristol County, which is somewhat useful because they're local to us. What we do is we adjust the rates per 1,000 residents. That way you can kind of look at it. Obviously, the towns are very different in size, but by comparing it to crime per 1,000 residents, we can look at it on a graph and see how we're doing. There's a number of towns that are notated at the bottom that have incomplete data. They have until sometime in March to submit all their data. This data goes to the FBI, the NIBR's reporting. So some of the numbers they haven't fully reported yet. Like Taunton, for instance, if you look at Taunton, it looks pretty good right now. We did speak to them about that, and they said they have not fully reported yet, so that's one of the reasons. But essentially, other than Taunton, who hasn't fully reported, we're lower than the other 3 cities.
So Chief, do you, just out of curiosity, our crime rate over time, let's say the last 5 years,
Yeah.
is the slope down, up, flat, or what?
Well, that would have been the previous slides we looked at. I talked about crime. This is the 5-year comparison, right here. So some of them up, some are down. Crimes against society, we explained kind of why that would have been up, because we were being more proactive with certain things. Yeah, so the crimes against a person went down, crimes against property went down, crimes against society went up. We know why they went up, so I'd say it went down compared to last year. Overall, on the average, it varies. Some are a little higher, some are a little lower.
I got a question, and it kind of goes back to grants, but may tie in with this. You said that sometimes you as a police department don't qualify. Is that because we are a suburb and there's less emphasis put on the fact that we are a suburb community? Because I see a interesting kind of a quandary here, if you will. Here we are dealing with people from out of the area, in the cities, but yet we may not qualify for grants because we're a suburb, but yet we're dealing with city problems that have unfortunately been had to be digested by us.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and that's kind of the reality is, so like, we've looked at overdose grants before. We didn't have enough people die of overdoses in town to qualify for those. A lot of the grant money out there targets gangs and so forth, which really hasn't been an issue in town, thankfully. So yeah, they tend to target the city issues more than issues we have in the town. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so then, and this is probably a better comparison, what we do is we look at our comparable towns. They're not necessarily close to us, but they're considered comparable, and that was based on that compensation study that was done, where they looked at finances of the towns and all kinds of different metrics to identify these towns. And that's kind of where we fit in with other towns. Some of them have not fully reported as well. There's, I think, 5 noted at the bottom that haven't reported fully. So some of those numbers are going to probably increase after they've fully reported. But we do stay busy here in town. You know,
Is there anything with the data you've shown so far that worries you, that, in terms of looking at statistics?
No, I mean, the data, it seems to stay relatively consistent year to year. We've always been relatively busy. We're located in between New Bedford and Fall River. And like I said earlier, between the motels, the businesses, the restaurants, we attract a lot of people. So like Westport is located, you know, in the same spot we are as Essence, but there's not a lot to go into Westport for, and so it doesn't really attract people from other cities, let's say, to come into, you know, into town. So there's nothing that I'm showing you tonight that stands out that we've got a big problem on the horizon. It's been pretty consistent over the years.
Thank you.
Okay, you all set, or?
Yep. This is just the same thing, similar towns. It talks about crimes against person, property, and society, just so you can see the individual breakdown of kind of what the towns are dealing with. And just go through quick here. Department supervision that I spoke about earlier, that's just so you can kind of look at it. The first 3, days, evenings, and mids, is the patrol division. The last one is special operations, and that's the one that has the single sergeant versus the 2, although it does have as many, if not more, officers than the patrol. Cruiser replacement, we can get into this if you're interested. Obviously, that's one of the larger costs that I request each year. I have some information on our patrol fleet right now. We're averaging 86,000 miles, and they're about just under 6 years old. We're looking to replace 4 vehicles that average age is 12 years with 135,000 miles. Each of those cars has repair costs that are estimated to be over 65% of the value of the car. A lot of times when we get to that point, we're just going to get rid of the car. We're going to trade it in for minimal amount of money and move on, because don't forget that idle time is going to push that car well up over 200,000 miles, and it's just not worth putting that kind of money into them. So if that request is approved, those are the cars we replace. That's the electric vehicle I talked about earlier with the benefits. People are concerned with batteries. It has an extensive battery warranty of 8 years, 100,000 miles. It's very uncommon to have to replace a battery. It's kind of like replacing an engine, very uncommon to do. And that's a purpose-built police vehicle, electric vehicle, made by Chevy. It's a Blazer made for police. Taser 10, talked about that. It's got increased range. Instead of getting 2 shots with it, we get up to 9 shots to make a contact with the subject. And the probes are individually targeted. Right now, we're restrained by distance. It has a spread. There's 2 probes you have to make. They have to contact with a person at a certain distance. Right now, they have a fixed angle. The targets come out together. So you have to adjust how close or how far you are to someone to get the right spread. That's very difficult to do in the situations that we deal with. With this one, you get to place each dart individually, so that's a big advantage. That's the cruiser storage I talked about earlier. The lifts to get out of the way so you can access the spare tire. That's it.
All right, yeah, I'd like to thank you. I mean, very good presentation. I just want to point out that, you know, one of the reasons we do this is people watch us on TV, they'll answer the questions before town meeting. But we're also preparing the person who is doing the presentation for town meeting so that we ask questions and they're prepared to, if it comes up in town meeting. So very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for adhering to the new format. Nice job. I know it's a change, but
Yeah, no, it's-
hoping it gets easier as the years progress.
If it helps you make
Yeah, no, it's,
I'm happy to do it. I know we ask for a lot of money to be rich.
Okay, let's to the library.
Library.
Okay, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening. I'm Dina St. Pierre, Director of Libraries for Dartmouth Public Library. I've been with Dartmouth Public Library for just under 2 years now, but I've been a librarian for over 20 years and a library director for 10 years. Gary, I believe, is going to share what I've submitted to you so that we can go through that together.
I have a question before you get started.
Yes, Brian?
When you did your strategic plan?
Yes.
Did you change your mission statement?
We did change the mission statement. We-
Because I had the old one, and I was trying to
Correct, on
figure
the
out.
demo, right, you had the old mission statement, right. No, we decided, because we have new leadership primarily, we have a new board of trustees from when we had the original mission statement, but also new director, new assistant director. The branch wasn't, North Branch wasn't yet built with the last strategic plan, so we felt it was time to update the mission statement. We did a vision statement, and we also did core values, and that really helped shape the plan.
Great. I'm not confused.
Okay. So the mission statement is different, yes, and the Dartmouth Public Library is dedicated to delivering high-quality experiences, including learning, cultural enrichment, and personal enjoyment for everyone. We are here for everyone in town. For the review of the prior year budget performance or the current year budget performance, our salary lines are underspent due to unexpected staff changes. Our library associate retired in August unexpectedly. The part-time information services librarian accepted the full-time library associate position and does make less money. And we have not yet filled that part-time information services librarian position. And like Chief Levesque mentioned, there was an increase to the director's salary that was under budgeted due to an increase in the COLA per the United Steelworkers contract. And the budget was not adjusted to reflect that change because it came after town meeting. But the overage that we will have in salaries will certainly cover the variance. In terms of general expenses, to date, most of our lines are as expected. Technology is under budgeted. In-state travel was under budgeted at only $100. And we're now starting, since COVID, to finally travel to in-person meetings. And natural gas, which I think you can imagine, but if you look at our actuals in a bit, we've been spending double what has been budgeted for the past at least 4 fiscal years. And so we are definitely, that was something a year ago when I presented to you I didn't realize was going to happen because I presented to you in January and our gas prices I hadn't seen that happen yet because it was my first budget cycle. And now I'm well aware that we need double what we have because that trend isn't going to change. In terms of library materials, we've had some major shipping delays from our primary material vendor. And when I say material, I mean the books primarily that we purchase. So that gives the impression when you look at our year-to-date that we're underspending in our library materials line, which is 55802. And that is not the case. We just have had shipping delays, and that's finally catching up. That was a problem starting in late October, early November, and we're finally starting to receive that material. We are required, as part of our state aid compliance with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, to spend at least $170,000 on material for direct patron use, and we will certainly reach that minimum target by the end of the fiscal year. Our major accomplishments to date, we've maintained state certification thanks to support from the town. I won't go through all of that because you've read it, I'm sure, already, but I would like to highlight that, one of the key parts of having state certification is that we qualify for state aid. And we did in FY24 receive our highest state aid award for a fiscal year ever with over $83,000. And this past December, we received $46,000, which is our highest single award to date. We will expect to receive a similar payment this spring so that hopefully we will certainly hit at least what we had last year for state aid. And we use state aid to supplement our appropriated budget. Another goal, we completed, as has already been mentioned, a new strategic plan. We used state aid funds to hire a consultant, and that consultant helped us through that 8-month process. We held focus groups with community and library stakeholders. We had a survey that received over 500 responses. Having that plan on file allows us to apply for grants, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And I did share a link within your documents for the strategic plan, and it is on the library's website. And if you haven't read it yet, I encourage you to do so. We worked really hard on it. We're in the process of replacing all 21 public and staff computers at Southworth Library using state aid funds to supplement the generous support of the Friends of the Dartmouth Libraries, who did purchase the bulk of those computers. And we've been able to maintain our status as the top circulating library in the Sales Library Network. Sales is made up of approximately 70 libraries, and we circulate the most physical material with the 2 libraries combined of any other library or library system, including New Bedford, in the network. We're very proud of that. Our digital usage has increased by 5%. That's our highest increase in digital usage since COVID. And our door count totals have continued to increase, and I did give you just some metrics to show you the difference. And we're certainly on track to surpass both circulation and door count for FY25.
Yeah, just a question.
Sure.
The state aid funds, those were general funds, not specific to computers?
No, those are, the state aid funds can be used for just about anything aside from staffing levels.
Okay.
So we can use that for any sort of material for direct patron use, any technology advancements,
Okay.
anything we want to supplement
So it
aside
wasn't,
from staffing.
It wasn't state aid for the computers? It was
No,
state
no,
aid.
no. We had received, like I had mentioned, over $83,000 last year in the new computers. We spent, I think it was right around $8,000 on the new computers using those state aid funds.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So the new budget summary, what I submitted to you is no longer accurate because after meeting with Gary and Brian and Janine were also at that meeting to review the budget, a request that we had been discussing for a really long time to take an existing position, which is a part-time position, and making it full-time was not in the original request. I just talked about it in the narrative, but it is now in the budget that you've received in our FY26 request, and I will talk about that a little bit more in a bit. So what you've received now reflects a $41,000 increase over FY25. Our municipal appropriation requirement, which is key to our certification, and it's based on a formula from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, which I know that some of you are familiar with. You take your 3 prior fiscal years, you get an average, you multiply that by 2.5%, and that determines what your appropriation requirement is. So the request that we've submitted does surpass that requirement. And it looks to address prior year variances, like in that natural gas line. Okay. So then, major goals, should we go on to that?
Can I,
Yep, you can, yep. The
So,
actuals.
when I'm looking at the actuals, the repairs to buildings and ground,
Yes.
$132,000
Yes.
versus 50. I know there were water pipes issued,
That's,
but I think we had a reserve to cover that. No, is that something different?
no, this is all to do with the pipes.
Didn't we give a reserve?
You did transfer money into that.
So that's on top of that?
No, that the reserve was transferred into that line, so that is the reserve fund transfer in the line.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's an actual, okay.
That's natural, yes.
Okay, I got it.
And there was a small amount of money left in an article for asbestos removal, because we did have to have some asbestos removed from tiling before those pipes were replaced. So it's not, but yes, it is an actual to the building and grounds, and fortunately, we shouldn't experience something like that again, so
absolutely.
knock on wood. A year ago, when we met, we didn't know that that was going to happen, because it happened about a week later, I believe.
Okay.
So no other, okay. So going on to the major goals, what I did was just take the goals from our strategic plan, and then we have to submit an action plan every year to the state with actionable goals for the coming fiscal year. So that's what we're going to look at tonight is our strategic plan goals with the actionable goals for FY26. But the big point I wanted to get across is our purpose is to serve the public, and we can do that by being open and our buildings being maintained well. So a lot of what is in our appropriated budget allows us to staff and allows us to have buildings that are open, pay the electric bill, pay other utility bills. I mean, there's not a lot of extra or any extra within our appropriated budget. So I do think our number one goal is to have our doors open and be there to serve the public with the material that they need and want. Yes.
So speaking of having doors open, have you received any complaints about the library being closed on Fridays, the North Branch?
I wouldn't call them complaints. Through the strategic plan, there were people who did say in the survey that they would like to see North Branch open on Friday. I think an important thing to remember is, though it's starting to really take off in usage, the intention of North Branch is that it's a branch of Dartmouth Public Library. Southworth is the main library. It's open 60 hours a week, 59 hours a week. Then we have, 60. We're required to be open 59, we're open 60. And then North Branch is open 43. That's very appropriate that a branch is not going to have the same amount of hours as a main library. So it is, it's still open 5 days. It's open Monday through Thursday and Saturday. We do not have the staffing levels currently to open on Friday. There would have to be some serious restructuring or a reduction in hours at Southworth Library to accommodate being open on Fridays. But was the comment made in the survey? Yes. But on a very small scale.
So have you looked at usage at Southworth to see if it merits the staffing that's in place right now?
Southworth's usage is on its own is the highest of any library in the sales network. So Southworth is doing double or triple what North Branch does. So even though North Branch is starting to see incredible increases, and we can really see by our circulation statistics that building deserves to be there and is finally being used by the community more and more, it's still not used on the level that Southworth is.
Okay.
Yeah, the monthly circulation statistics are always double, sometimes triple, depending on the time of year at Southworth. And also, just to that point, I would like to say, my office is at Southworth, so someone might say that if you looked at staffing levels between the two buildings, we have people who are in roles that their offices are at Southworth, but that doesn't mean that they're also not working at North Branch. I work 1 day a week at North Branch. Our assistant director, whose office is at Southworth, works 1 day a week at North Branch. Our children's librarian, whose office is at Southworth, works 1 day a week at North Branch. So it's hard to say, because we're sharing staff among the two locations. Okay, so in terms of the goals, I won't go through every single item because, again, I know you've seen that here, but our first goal, according to the strategic plan, is to enhance community engagement and awareness. We're really on a path right now that we want people to think of Dartmouth Public Library first when they're thinking of going to a museum. We'll find out if we have a discount pass. When they want to read a book, but maybe don't want to go buy it, or it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they'd like to download something, but they don't want to pay for it, download a book or a movie, we might have that for them because we have a very extensive online collection and a lot of resources available online. So we want people to think of us, and we can do that by enhancing our community engagement and awareness overall. But then within that, we have some actionable goals that just include continuing outreach to the school department, continuing outreach to Autumn Glen and other facilities like it, continuing to work with the town's communication coordinator on our branding and making sure that our marketing is consistent. Goal 2, empower people and enhance places. We would love to look into options for delivery services to homebound community members, and perhaps partnering with the COA would be an option to make that happen. We'd also, because this was probably the #1 most requested thing through the survey results, we would like to start talking about a redesign of Southworth Library as a long-term capital request. Goal 3, cultivate inclusive collections and diverse programming. Like I mentioned, we're here for everyone, and our collections should reflect that. We are going to be able to conduct a diversity audit of all of our collections using software available to us through the Sales Network. That's new software that they acquired this year, and we're looking forward to working with that, hopefully by summer. I'm going to speak more about a library of things in a little bit, but we would love to engage patrons with new offerings and give people things that maybe they're not expecting to find within a library setting. Goal 4, embrace emerging technology. A lot of vehicles no longer come with CD players, and people don't own CD players as much anymore, but we do have a lot of requests for audiobooks, especially for children who are learning how to read. So we're looking into physical replacement options for books on CD. And enhance staff capacity to meet evolving needs. Part of empowering people is also empowering the staff so that they feel confident and able to help the public. We don't all have the same skill set. The public often thinks that if they walk in, everyone who's working there knows the same thing, and that's not the case, but we would love to empower our staff as much as possible to feel comfortable when helping people on the computer or answering questions about digital resources. And so we do need to do some training for that.
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
Southworth Library you're talking about. What's the main driver for you wanting to redesign, if you will, the library? What's your major cause of concern?
It's
that
an
would drive
outdated
that?
space. I mean, the building opened in 1969, and very little has changed on the interior since 1969. In the late 90s, the children's room moved from the upper level to the lower level. I believe it was 90s, it was 90s, right? And the walls were never painted, so if you're ever in Southworth Library and you see some red, green, blue, yellow on the second floor, that used to be the children's room. And we're at a point now, 30 some odd years later, that we'd like to change that and maybe perhaps change the layout. When the building was first opened, nobody used the lower level. People used the main entrance to get in and out of the library. Now the lower level is used triple the amount that the upper level is used. There's no staff sight lines. You walk in, you don't see anybody, So when we're talking redesign, it's perhaps can we do something to make it that the staff is more visible to the public when the public walk in what really has become the main entrance. And I don't know if that's possible, but we'd love to explore options on how to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you walk in the parking lot right to the...
Yeah, you are, and people have asked us to improve signage, and that's all well and good, but a lot of people don't stop and read signage. So it's, and I'm saying that as a librarian. I think if you walk in and you don't know where you are, then there's just bathrooms right there. There's nothing really welcoming when you first walk in. Even the auditorium when the doors are shut, because we do leave the Haskell room doors shut when there isn't a program going on, and it's not a welcoming entrance at all when you walk in. Okay, so then the department statements, you have those, so you're seeing our requests. And if you don't have any specific questions about
This
that.
is the organization you're talking about?
The statements with the
So,
operating
yeah,
budget.
I have a...
Let's look at the operating.
Because, I'm looking at the police station, and it's got 22, 23, 24, and you got the 24 actuals, but then you got the 25 budget. Where's the 26 budget?
Well, you're right,
that's
so
right.
that should be on the current,
this?
next year,
You
current
have
year
it.
budget
No,
analysis.
it
You
should
should
be
have that one.
Munis?
You have it right, the next page, Bob.
Yeah, Munis, I know, yeah.
Yeah.
But the beauty of what the police department did.
They put on one page.
They put it all on one page.
Yeah. So you could see the
I mean,
comparison.
I'd rather give up fiscal year '21 and have this year's request on, instead of having to go, okay, this is this, and that, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, we can update the,
I mean, I totally understand that, but again, that's not something that was uniformly told to us, you know, to do it that way. And I see the value in that completely, certainly after watching Chief Levesque's presentation. But the actuals that we were given just include
Okay,
what
I
they are,
understand.
actuals, and then munis. But certainly, I'm sure if you wanted
Yeah,
departments to
so-
do that, then all departments could do that in the future.
Yeah,
And I
so-
certainly can.
Well, is there any way we can
yeah, we can update
drop
that sheet.
21? Drop 21,
Yeah, we can remove this and add
and
26.
just add the budget for 26.
Yeah,
That
oh, yeah.
way,
We changed the font to.
just move it over.
Yeah, we'll hide this.
Can we get that for the next meeting?
You have this in Excel.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because it, you know, the whole purpose of this is to,
yeah, I mean, eventually the committee will have to look at the munis report at a later date.
Absolutely,
Yeah, at a
absolutely.
later date.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. So, we can adjust the column.
Yeah.
can we
And
get that for, can we get that
Yeah,
in a
we can
week?
next week.
We get that
Well,
in-
we can send it to the committee.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Once Dina updates it,
Sure,
she'll send it to me and I'll forward it on.
sure.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for mentioning that. I'm happy to do whatever it is you want of us, but it should be consistently put out for everyone. I mean, the way that you explained it this year was, I think, great. I didn't have an issue with how you explained it last year either, but the way, you know, it was laid out for us this year was great, but certainly, you know, it's,
It's a work in progress.
yes, thank you.
Right.
Well, I think it's a two-way thing. You can criticize us, and we can
Right, oh,
criticize-
no, I don't have any criticisms of you right now. No,
We're working on it, all right?
Thank you.
No, I mean, I looked at the police, I said, that's perfect.
yeah, no, it
Yeah,
did,
it's
it did
a
look
good
great.
example.
No, I
It's
totally,
almost perfect.
I totally understand what you're saying. But hey, whose department was highlighted as an example from last year? No, just kidding. Um, So the organizational chart, which I thought was great that you asked to see that this year, and I'm sorry it's so small on the screen, but you should have it in your packet. So we, you know, have a board of trustees with 6 members. 2 of them are present tonight, Joan Marie Prue and Linda Garibaldi. And so they oversee us. I report to both them and to town administration. And then, as you can see, we branch off from there. We currently have 23 budgeted positions. 9 of those positions are full-time and 14 are part-time. So this is not 23 full-time staff members, and the part-time positions range from 8 hours a week to 19 hours a week.
You having trouble finding people?
No. I'm amazed at the longevity at Dartmouth Public Library. People have stayed for a very long time. We have a staff member this year who's celebrating, I believe it's 32 years, and there are other people who are very close to that. And we have advertised the vacant part-time information services librarian position and have received a lot of applicants for that. Unfortunately, that position requires a master's degree. It's only a part-time position, the way that we have it now, and that's what we're trying to get to be full-time. And we're attracting a lot of people who don't have any experience. So we're not having trouble having people apply. They're just people who either don't have the master's degree yet or in process to get it, but don't have any public library experience to go along with their education.
I remember when we were talking with Gary in our meetings, you had mentioned that there's a lot of turnover in the assistant library position because as soon as somebody gets their degree, they move on to a job that is higher paying.
Right, that is extremely typical in the library world. It's not typical at Dartmouth Public Library, but that is typical in the library world, especially when you're talking about part-time positions that require the master's degree. A lot of our positions do not require a master's degree.
There's no way around that, because eventually that costs money. Get people in to turn them over, get people in to turn them over.
Correct. Well, I'm hoping that one way around that will be that we increase that position from part-time to full-time. And then we'll be able to retain that person for a long time to come.
How is custodial services working out?
There are pros and cons to that, for sure. Tim Lancaster is outstanding, and, when we have a problem and I call him, and now he has a foreman also who I can reach out to if Tim isn't available. They do send people very quickly to the library to take care of any problems on the day-to-day. But there are things that come up that you just wish somebody was there to take care of in the moment. And that can range from something as small as emptying our book drop, which is very unwieldy. It's very difficult to remove it from the container. And there are a lot of staff members who won't even try to do it, and I don't blame them for that. And when we had a full-time custodian at Southworth, that person would go out and get the book drop throughout the day. If it starts to snow during the day and we need to go out and salt, we're the ones going out and doing it, or maybe doing some light shoveling because we don't have a custodian on hand and the other custodians are out working for the other town buildings. So pros and cons. Pros and cons. I would have loved to experience it. I would have loved to have known what it was like to have the custodian present. I came in right after that went away.
In your previous town that you worked in, did they have a full-time custodian?
I've worked in 2 libraries that have had, I've worked in 4 libraries in Massachusetts. 2 had a full-time custodian on duty, and my most previous one did not. Had the same setup we have here. So I was really looking forward to coming in. I was sad to learn that had changed. Didn't stop me from coming, but I was sad to learn that. In terms of cost reduction, we're always looking at our vendor contracts. We work through contracts with the Massachusetts Higher Education Consortium, so we're always looking through those to make sure that the vendors that we're working with for our material are giving the best price, the best service, the best quality of material. We have a lot of our material covered out by these vendors with Mylar plastic, and we're not having a great experience. I mentioned the delays we're having with our main vendor right now. We're not having a great experience, and we're worked with MHEC, and now we're in the process of moving to a new vendor to do the bulk of our purchasing, and I think that will be somewhat of a savings. In terms of revenue generation opportunities, this is a difficult question for the director of the Free Public Library because free is in the title. To that end, we removed fines for most of our overdue items in FY25, which was another major accomplishment for us. So we're not really seeking out revenue generating opportunities, but I did share something with you that we can talk about right now. Your local library is invaluable sheet, so we might not be looking to generate revenue, but our community saved over $3.8 million by using the public library in 2024. So maybe we're not generating revenue, but for those people who are using the public library, they're saving a lot of money, $2.8 million in books alone. So I think that's an important thing to think about when you're thinking about.
And that's generated how?
This is through a calculator on ilovelibraries.org. And so we take our circulation statistics and we plug that in to their calculator to determine how, based on the cost of hardcover books, the cost of paperback books. So I have to plug in all of our circulation numbers in order to get that.
Is it possible to do that over time, like the chief did, like for 5 years running?
I did do it last year too, so you have,
Yeah, I remember you did. I
so
remember this is the
I
same
could
thing you
certainly
did.
this is
Yeah.
the same exact thing, just with different numbers this year, but I can certainly put that
I would
together in
like
a
to see
different
that
kind
over
of
time
chart
in
for a cost
charts,
analysis over
because
time.
that justifies that you're doing
Correct.
a good job.
Right. No, I could certainly do that.
Please.
Yeah.
Do you find, I saw at some point in the notes that there's been an increase in the digital
Yes.
books. I mean, I discovered that kind of during COVID, and I love it because I just download it to my Kindle, I can read it.
Yes.
Saves me money from buying the book, and also, I used to buy physical books, and then it's what do you do with them?
Correct.
And I kind of rediscovered the library during COVID. You have a great staff, there was a great pickup program. I don't think you
Yes.
were there at the time, but it kind of got me into the digital books, and now I love those, but sometimes there's a wait for certain materials. Do you
Yes.
find there's more spending now on those licenses for sales?
Yes, and we are, public libraries, so we use Overdrive. You're probably referring to the Libby app, so that's powered by Overdrive. There are some publishers that won't allow Overdrive to have a license when a book comes out. We have to wait a couple of months, up to a couple of months sometimes for new titles. Not all publishers, but a lot of publishers do that. And we're paying, as a consumer, you might go on Amazon and download something to your Kindle and it might cost $10, and the library is paying 4 to 5 times that price. So we're up against the fact that our costs are way higher than they would be if we weren't libraries, because the publisher doesn't want you to get your book from the library. They want you to pay for it. So also to that end, when we buy the license, we only get it for a limited amount of time. So when we buy a physical book, that could be sitting on the shelf. I mean, well, nowadays, physical books are not made to sit on a shelf and circulate for 20 years. There's a time where that physical books were made to be durable and last that way. But now, let's say, a physical book could circulate really well for 5 years, and then we might have to replace it. With a digital copy, it can only circulate 24 times before we have to replace it. So, and people are getting it for 3 weeks at a time. So if, 24 times over 3 weeks, the next year, we're having to buy another copy of that. And then that's when you start running into the long wait list with Libby.
So
Because
when I check out the same book 18 times because I don't read it, it's detrimental to the library.
Yep, you're taking one of those checkouts. But hey, that's your right to do that. We want you to do that.
And
We
does-
do want you to
does-
do it. And we want you, the way Libby works, we have something called an Advantage account. So when we're ordering extra copies through the Advantage account, Dartmouth card holders have priority on those copies. So I'd much rather you borrow that book 8 times or 18 times than someone who's not a Dartmouth patron. Because now the way Libby works, the entire state can borrow our collection. So, I love that we're part of a network and that our patrons can borrow from other libraries in the network and vice versa. But, I don't need someone on the Cape borrowing our material. I'd much rather you, Dartmouth residents, be borrowing our
Does
material.
Hoopla work differently?
Hoopla is completely different. With Hoopla, there are no waits. And the difference with Hoopla, it's a cost per use model. So every time you borrow something on Hoopla, that's when we pay for it, which is why you have the limit of 10 items per month. So we get a bill monthly, and our Hoopla usage is starting to increase. We're paying about $1,000 more a month for Hoopla now than we were a year ago.
Just to go back, did you cover grants yet? Or-
No, I haven't gotten
Okay,
there
so-
yet. Yep. I hopped over to how we save you money, because we're not making money for you, but we're saving you money. So grant opportunities. So the benefit, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You want everybody else.
Yes,
Your local
Janine.
library is invaluable. Did you share that information publicly?
Yes, it was in one of I think it was our February e-newsletter, and we've also shared it to our Facebook page. It's not on the website, it should be we should put it on the website. We had it posted in both libraries, along with the year in review.
There's a little percentage of people that somehow don't think libraries have any value.
Correct. Yeah, we'll push that out again, and we'll get it on the website. It would be a good thing to have on the homepage. Thank you for mentioning that. So in terms of grants, now that we have that current strategic plan on file, we can apply for LSTA grants, so Library Service and Technology Act grants through the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. We're just in the very early stages of looking at what would work for us as a grant for FY26 and beyond. Again, you need staff to work on those, and it is very time consuming, especially when you want to thoughtfully apply for something to get the most money that you can. But we are starting to look into that, and something that didn't make it into the narrative because it happened after I had submitted the narrative, I heard from the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District that there is a grant opportunity to start a library of things, which I briefly mentioned earlier. And we have a limited window to do this, but we are going to do it. The grant is for $2,000. $1,000 would come from our own DPW through grant funds that they've received, and $1,000 would come from the district. And a library of things, if you don't know, a lot of libraries in the area do have them, but they typically are non-traditional items. Like right now, we do circulate hotspots, and those are considered to be things. But other libraries in the area are circulating ukuleles and metal detectors and gardening tools, that kind of stuff. And this grant would allow us to start a library of things, and we'll supplement it with our state aid, because I don't think $2,000 is going to get us super far, but we're going to try. We have a survey out right now that's on our Facebook page, also on the website, asking people in the community what they would like to see in a library of things, and we're getting some really interesting responses: toys, science experiment kits, seasonal decorations, cookware, old tech, VHS to digital converters, things that people might like to use or try out, but not something they necessarily want to invest in. So again, we'd like to save people money by having it available for them to borrow from the library. And the goal of the district is that it would reduce waste in Crapo Hill landfill. So we'd like to help with that too. So that was already part of our strategic plan and was already in our actionable goals for FY26. So it was just fortuitous that I got that phone call a few weeks ago, and we're moving very quickly on making that happen, because we have until June 30th. But really, for us, that means we have until like beginning of May before summer reading kicks off. So we're going to make
You
it
had
happen.
mentioned that it's very time-consuming to write grants and
Yes.
track them and everything else. You have
To
discover
thoughtfully
them.
do it and get the most, yes.
Do you think you would benefit from more support from the town in terms of grants?
I think we could, and I think, I know that Chris Vitale has worked with other people on grants. We haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, but I would welcome being able to work with him or someone else within town who could help with that as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else? What questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great
I
job.
appreciate
Great
your
job.
time.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will get you that revised list. Thank you.
And I would like to see some stats over time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do that too. Thank you.
Okay, so, next thing up, I guess, Holly Baker Smith invited us, proposal for CPA funding, on March 11th.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, you have the letter in front of you in your packet from CPC for invitation. This is their annual invitation for the Springtown meeting to discuss their warrant articles. If you're planning on attending.
Yeah, well, we can't have more than 5 people go, and John is the liaison.
I'm away.
You're
so
away?
I
Okay.
will not be.
Is there a
at that.
plan on having more than one person? We'll have Buddy Baker Smith in to review his warrant article, once we
Yeah.
go over warrant articles.
Well,
So,
it's up to everybody, we just can't have 5 people there.
if there's gonna be more than 5, then I'll post it, like I did last year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this, 25,000 and 50,000 for the
Yeah, they're
cemetery,
minimal.
it's not a big
Yeah, they're
thing,
not.
so.
Yeah, he'll be in any, as he does each and every year to go over the warrant
To
himself.
explain it again.
Yes. So prior to that, on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, you have, I have the schedule for the next meeting, just so the committee members know. On 2/20 will be the DPW, Water and Sewer, and that will be the only department speaking
Okay.
on the 20th.
Are you going to
to
circulate a packet like you did previously?
Yes, yeah, you'll have the packet before the next meeting, obviously, I'll send it out like over the weekend. And then on the 27th, you have the Council on Aging, and then also Conservation.
Okay.
And then on March 6th, we have the schools.
Okay, so that's the big one, right?
And so that is the That is the schedule up until the beginning of March. And then I have the Schedule A in draft form, which we'll discuss in the second week of March, along with potentially the warrant articles.
That early?
Yes. We'll have some of the warrant articles to look at.
So-
I don't foresee it to be, I don't foresee,
recorded.
well, I don't
Some of the
foresee,
warrant
I don't
articles.
foresee it to be that many articles that Chris and I have accumulated so far. But we will have at least a draft of the Schedule A. And we're also meeting in conjunction with CIPC over the next couple of weeks to discuss departmental budgets and the requests. So it's coming together. I think that we will have the warrant articles in March to discuss. That's a goal.
We're just skeptic. What can I say?
Very, very pessimistic about this.
It's a goal.
I don't know, it's lesson learned.
We'll be running up against a deadline at the end, you know, if we
Always.
get started early.
I think you did good last year, though. It wasn't too bad.
The last year, we're on target right now with the schedule that we have, I submitted to the committee. So we're in pretty good shape.
Okay,
And then,
we have
that's it for me.
minutes.
Liaison reports?
Well, we got, okay, we can do that. Okay, liaison reports, anybody got liaison? Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I met with the Council on Aging because I knew I was not going to be here for her presentation, so and Gary, I believe, and Brian met with her as well, is Amy DePietro.
Yep.
Yes.
And I liked what she had presented in the form, and apparently, from what she told me, the feedback that she got from you folks, that it also went well, so hopefully her presentation in March will go as well. So I was very impressed with what she did. It was very well organized and well thought, and I thought she and Angela did a terrific job on it.
Yeah, just one comment, Mr. Chairman. I think that the feedback that I've gotten from the one-on-ones that we had with the departments was positive. I'd like to thank the committee members that showed up, and some of the questions that were asked, I think, were timely, and I think that was a very efficient process. I've gotten, as I said, a lot of feedback from the departments on that, and I think it helps the process and educates the committee on any timely information for the budget. So I just want to thank the committee members that did show up.
So just to add to that, because I did go to all those meetings, it was very informative, actually. It was a great opportunity to ask lots of questions and just have a good conversation on many things related to their departments. So it was certainly worth the time.
I want to thank you for your organization, getting the information out to us early, moving things along in those meetings. It's very, very helpful, Gary.
The larger departments, I've had a couple of conversations now with the school department, Jim Kiley. We're very productive, we've been very productive in those conversations. They presented the budget on Monday, I believe, of this week, and we're pretty close with the requests. So it might take one more meeting, and we can fine tune that, but we're very close with the school department's request. And I think that having them in on the 6th, Jim will go over a lot of the strategic plan that they have in place and a lot of the requests that they're looking for FY26 and then into FY27 also. So it should be a good conversation with the schools.
And I would like to thank you for shepherding through the new format for the budget presentations. I think what I've seen to date is very good.
I think that, again, through the department head meetings that we've had, not only with the monthly department head meetings, but I'm not going to guarantee everyone is going to look exactly the same, but I think what we should do is, and I mentioned this at the one-on-ones, we have a session where we review them, and we send comments back to the department heads with any information that they want. They know that this is the first go-around, and I think the effort that they put into it is much more detailed than in the past.
Have you reviewed them all at this point, or?
I've reviewed about 90% of them.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do, set aside one session to review those, and again, send back feedback to the departments, and be more constructive for the departments.
I mean, these two were great. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, and like I've told them, they built a template, so next year, it may be, hopefully it's that much easier just to build off of what they've, and then we can see a trend going forward.
Agreed.
So liaison reports, Carrie and I have been attending the school committee reports at the school committee meetings. I'll start and maybe you can add
No,
anything,
you-
Carrie.
Yeah.
But the two things that I would bring up, the budget was initially presented, not, the hearing hasn't been held. They have to hold a hearing to get feedback from the community. The request for the high school roof is in. Also, Mr. Kiley met with the school building assistants
MSBA.
staff who came out. They came out actually on the snow day, so he was able to give them a complete tour of all the buildings, and that turns out to be very informative to them because they did not have some of that information. So it's not going to be, the official request is the school roof, but kind of in the back of their mind is the other part of this.
Windows was involved.
They
in
did
that.
talk about the new budget format. It's a completely different shift for the school to do this, so, but Mr. Kiley left saying that he was going to be working on that. What else, Carrie, anything else?
Well, I mean, they're still using the rest of their school choice money, so, you know, there's a lot of concern about if the budget remains the way it is in the next 2 years, they're not going to be able to maintain their budget. So either we're going to see a drastic increase, more than 4.1 like what we've been seeing, or we're going to see potentially there's 11 things that they're, you know, positions, staffing positions that are part of that. So I confronted them and said, what's our plan to wean us off of using school choice funds? We have to wean off, it's not sustainable. But there really is no plan at this point, like they're going year to year, so we're just kicking the can down the road.
Well, you'll recall that, was it the year before last, that they were told they have a 3.1? Yeah, that was one. So that, and then there were a couple of meetings about, a fast track to an override, and then that disappeared. The school choice funding will last next year.
Yeah.
After that, it will be depleted. So now is the time to be planning in that budget, because last year 11 positions were cut, this year 9 are being proposed. I do
Last year
have,
was 11, this year's 9, is that what you said?
say that again, please?
Last year was 11, and this
Yeah.
year is 9.
And I
But
think,
they were adding too. They cut positions, but they added positions.
Yeah,
so-
you're right.
so it's not-
They-
Some are cut,
Yeah,
there's
they-
been a shift in money,
we'll get
that's
you that
true.
information, but you had asked Janine what the impact was, so I do have that written. I'll send that out to everybody, what the impact of last year's cuts were.
Yeah, I watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I just watch it on YouTube.
I have a
Go ahead, Bill.
question. I was working with Gary, and, I've been on this school bus transportation issue with how much it's costing us in comparison to the overall school budget. And we sent something to Mr. Kiley and the school department, and it had to do with the possibility of actually rendering fees to use the bus service. Other communities do it. We and Gary would like to have sat down with them. They haven't yet to respond to that request. Unfortunately, I will not be here. I'm going to be out of the country until the end of March, but I would have liked to. We gave them plenty of time for them to meet with us, and that baton was not picked up. So I hope between now and town meeting, we can come to some type of meeting and maybe get the ball rolling, maybe not, but I think we should at least discuss the logistics of that.
I think something that has to get approved by the school committee, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, but in order to do that, I think we should have had an initial conversation with the
Right.
school department first, and then test the waters with the school committee. It's absolutely correct, Curry.
I know in the budget presentation, one of the recommendations was from Mr. Kiley to reduce one bus route, which would total 80,000.
He dropped one bus.
So the conversation, if the committee wants to dig a little deeper, we've asked for that from Mr. Kiley, and I'm sure with the budget, he's busy with that, and, I can ask him again for the information.
Yeah, and he
As far as
also
the
said,
contract and how many runs there are, how many students take
For
place.
historical purposes, before I came here, the school committee did propose fees one year, and there were so many complaints
Yeah.
that the select board came up with the money to stop that from happening. So there would have to really be widespread agreement on doing something like that.
Sure, I think it's worth the conversation. If it doesn't go anywhere, then it doesn't go anywhere, but this transportation budget is very unwieldy, and it's getting worse.
Yeah, I know last year he did say that he cut one bus last year and he's cutting another bus this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
I had a comment before, I didn't get a chance to speak, but to previous conversation on these preliminary budget meetings that Gary's had, we've got I and others started going last year, and that was a precedent we set that had never happened before. That Finance Committee went in Gary's office for these preliminary meetings, and I remember thinking to myself that, you know, are we going to be perceived as interfering or thorn in their side? Didn't care, I was going to go anyway, but I was wondering how we were going to be perceived. And Gary, if you don't mind, I'll share your comments. He made a comment to us, or at least me, that this year he got some feedback from the department heads that they appreciated the Finance Committee's interest in going to these meetings. So that was really nice to hear. And to be quite honest with you, I'm proud to serve with this committee, knowing, you know, I've been involved in town meeting for 40 years. I don't think I've ever seen a finance committee that's been so in-depth, so in tune, and so hard-working and reaching out to the community and getting involved. And I've heard some comments. I think some of the people might consider that we're overreaching or we're throwing on their side, but I'm proud to be the part of this committee and doing the work we're doing because we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I just want to talk waterways. Waterways, it looks like they're going to be ready for May with the new marina. They're going to name it on behalf of Warren Hathaway. They're going to call it the Warren Hathaway Marina at Dias Park. So there's no
The Dias Park.
Dias, what is it?
Landing.
Landing.
I was just going to say, are they changing? Okay.
Yeah. So they're going to town. If you go by there, you can see they brought the stuff in and they're driving the pilings in. So that's like a project that's come together, and it's there was an issue about the delay in the boat excise, so they're kind of working that out because it's an issue, but that's about it. Okay. No, I thought
Nothing.
you went to-
No.
No, I've been watching the school committee thing, so I'll hold my comments until we get a little bit further on into it. But anything else before we do the minutes? Anybody else before we do the minutes?
I don't think so.
Okay, so Finance Committee meetings, meeting minutes from November 2nd.
Seventh.
Seventh, I'm sorry, 7th.
Motion to approve as printed.
Second.
Okay, approved by John.
Seconded by Janine.
Janine. Patrick, you have to
I'll abstain, I
abstain.
wasn't present.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I hear none. It's approved. And thank her again for the minutes. They're very, very detailed.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah. Anything else before we adjourn? Go ahead, Mr. Jay.
So Brian, you sent it to everybody, right, that list?
Oh, yeah.
Of the
I-
different topics?
Right.
I mean, I think that list was great, and I don't think we should overlook it, because we have a tendency to make these lists and never see them again.
All right, well, I'm not going to overlook it. But
No, it's
I'm not
not
going to
true.
burden you tonight because I tend to blather.
Okay,
And so-
that's all right, I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw it, might have other things to add to it,
Yes. So we can bring it up some other time.
and we should make sure it
Okay, that's
gets on
fine.
agendas.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just so you know, Patrick, we kind of, we're a little informal. We go by our first names here, we don't go by our last names, so I just think it makes it a little bit easier.
You can call me
Except for
up.
Bob, he's Mr. Chairman.
I'm Mr. Chairman. He's high in the chair. Anything else before we adjourn?
Yes, sir, I make a motion to adjourn.
Terry made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Brian, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Uh,